And last of all, a standard invoice, which is comics that are valued at more than $300 but less than $1,000. I chose not to fast track these, as you know the base price on CGCing these books is $60. And the thing is, they're supposed to be done within 15 days regardless. So even though they do fall behind those notations, I didn't see the value in adding any money to those, because they generally get the standards and the express and the walk-ins back to you very rapidly without having to fast track them. Very small invoice, because it's hard to get up those comic books that are in the $300 to $1,000 range. So I only had 5 books sitting aside that were ready to go, and it was these 5 books. Of the 5 books, 2 of them came back exactly as I hoped they would, and 3 of them came back better than I hoped they would, meaning 0 of them came back at less. So even though it's a small invoice, that's an invoice where I batted basically 1,000, getting 2 perfectly on and 3 ups, which, you know, should actually give you more than your 1,000 rating, because you got better than you expected. You hit the ball harder than you thought you could. First off, Superman, this is one of the books that we showed you before in our earlier videos, which we sent in, which was a peculiar book, which I was kind of concerned about it. For one thing, it's got some very, very large overhang at the bottom, and it has on the back cover as well. There is significant staining on the back cover, which is what brought it down to only a 5.0, which is what I thought it would be. But the strange thing about this, and I was very worried, is that this book has staples through the interior of the body, and then it also has another set of staples through the cover and through the body, which, you know, I thought they might see as being something that was somehow manipulated, and that this cover was married to this book and not an original production thing. Obviously, they either didn't catch it, which I would think would be not correct, but even not catching it, they made no notation about it. So as far as I'm concerned, I guess, you know, well, I'm up in the air. Did they miss it, or does it just not matter? I would think that it would be a notation on there, but for some reason or not, it's not. And it used to be also the overhang. This had a very vicious bottom overhang. It used to be that CGC would not encapsulate a book that had overhang for fear that the interior well would cause that overhang to be scrunched under and therefore torn up. But nowadays, it seems like they don't matter. I used to get books back that they'd said, no, too much overhang, we can't do it. But I've not gotten a book back from them with an overhang for 20, well, they haven't been around 20 years, for the last, it's been probably 5 years or more. As I'd mentioned when we got this book, very interesting book, because this was the first time that DC ever acknowledged that they had a past history. And very unusual too, in so much as they did it on this issue, 100, then came Superman 200. They didn't really acknowledge it. Superman 300 didn't really acknowledge it. Superman 400, I think they did by then. And the same thing applied to their tentpole titles, Action, Detective, and Adventure. There's an Action 100 there, and no mention whatsoever, and a very, very lame cover, okay? Action 100, they didn't acknowledge it. Action 200, they didn't acknowledge it. Action 300 had a nice cover and a nice story, but they really didn't, you know, do any whoop-de-doo, any partying about it. Action 400, nice Neil Adams cover, you know, no real acknowledgement. It wasn't until Action 500 that they did. Same thing with Adventure. Adventure 100, no acknowledgement. Adventure 200, no acknowledgement. Adventure 300, the Legion of Superheroes started in 300, so it's kind of a special issue, but still it wasn't any kind of celebration. Adventure 400 was a Supergirl issue. Again, no real celebration. It wasn't until issue 500 that DC even started to acknowledging their history and saying this is a milestone issue. Detective, same thing. Detective 100, no acknowledgement. Detective 200, no acknowledgement. Detective 300, Polka Dot Man, no acknowledgement. Detective 400, that was the first Man-Bat story, kind of a blurb. Great story, great early Neil Adams stuff, but still wasn't quite acknowledged till issue 500. So this stands out. Once again, and also then later on, just a little bit later, Batman 100, they did the same thing where they showed various covers of the history of Batman. So, very nice issue. There's only 31 CGC copies better. Always in demand. Great book. Batman number 40 and 5.5. No big deal, but a Joker cover. All Joker covers are hot and desirable. Anything with the Joker on the cover is great. Okay, those were our things that came back as graded. These are the things that came back better than I expected them to. Batman Christmas cover, number 33. A lot of silly stuff going on in these early Batman covers. Nothing to do with the interior stories. A lot of silliness that I'm ashamed of. Sorry. Batman number 33, I expected to get just a 7.0 out of it. Got an 8.0. In fact, this was a book that I had bought as an old CGC 7.0. And I was able to, let me say it artfully once again, that I was able to fix this up a little bit. And I brought it up from a 7.0 to an 8.0. As an 8.0, let's see. As an 8.0, there's only 10 CGC copies that are better than this 8.0. Real interesting book. Real fact, number 5. I bought this as a raw 5.0. I basically paid 4.0 price for it, so I got it at a real good price. I thought that it was a little underrated when I bought it. I thought it could have been graded a little higher, which is strange for me because generally my grading is quite conservative. But I thought it would grade out as a 6.5 after let me artfully dance around the question again of fixing a book. It came back in, let's see, I expected a 6.5, got a 7.0. Very interesting book because Batman is prominently, and Robin, prominently on the cover with a story about how Bob Kane was the luckiest stiff on the planet. It really doesn't get into how he plagiarized and stole and had other people do all his work for him and how he was basically a talentless hack. He was the luckiest guy in the world who the only reason why he ended up making money off of his creation, as opposed to Siegel and Schuster, who made all of, I think it was $300 or $500 when they signed away their rights to Superman. The only reason why Bob Kane came out of this lucky and had his name forever pasted on Batman as the creator was the fact that he signed his contract with DC underage. And when that was found out, lawyers got involved. His daddy brought in the lawyer, took care of it, and the lawyers came in with underage Bob Kane and made sure that they got him a good contract that made DC allow him to produce for them Batman stories for, I don't know, forever or whatever, and that's how he got his name on Batman. Even though Bob Kane did not produce all the DC Batman stories. In fact, DC produced their own Batman stories, and those are often the better stories done by Dick Sprang. But he would bring in Batman stories to DC, which supposedly he had done, which were really not done by him. They were usually ghosted by people like Jerry Robinson and mostly Sheldon Moldoff. And Bob Kane would just deliver them as his own work, collect a check, and then go give part of that to the people who were ghosting for him. Once again, like I say, Bob Kane, the luckiest man in the world. After fixing up this book, there are only 10 CGC copies better. The guide price on this is $7.30. Like I said, I bought it supposedly as a 5.0. It's now a 7.0. Somebody would be happy to get that. Last item, and we're going to say goodnight, Gracie, and that's a Conan #1, which I bought as a CGC 9.0. I thought that it looked like it could use a little fixing up. I did do that to it, and I expected to get a 9.4 on it, and it came back a 9.6. Big winner. As a 9.6, there's only 30 copies better in 9.8, and as a 9.6, this is now a $1,500 book. And that's all for today, and I'm going back to my reading, folks. See you later.